So what I did was that I looked at players who have received some type of individual award. So that would be the best player in the world, the best player in Europe, the best player in the World Cup, and so forth. How do they perform in penalty shootouts? And as you can see, they score on 59% of their shots, the award players, which is lower, considerably lower, than the non-award players, the regular players, but still at a high level, who score at 74% of their shots. However, these findings are not quite significant. What is significant is when we add a third group to this, because this group here are the players who perform after they have been recognized by the football world as superstar players. What about the players who perform at one point and then sometime later in their career they get an award? Those players are interesting because you could say, have the same skills as these guys, but the world doesn't know it yet, so they don't have the status, the expectations, and so forth. They score on 89% of the shots. So this, in many ways, is the difference between performing with expectations and performing without expectations, but still with skill. These differences become even more interesting when we look at the position differences within this. What you can see is, this is exactly the same graph as I just showed you, only for forwards. You see some difference, but not really a big difference. Here, of course, also the sample size go down, so we don't really get significant results here, only trends. Midfielders, somewhat more of a difference, but still not very big. And this is the case with defenders. Now, obviously, this is interesting because 25% of these players score in penalty shootouts, and that's not big. Not so many of them, hence not really big significant findings. But the explanation why this may be the case is even more interesting, because here you have a player who has a big status in the football world, but his status does not come from performing in front of the opposition's goal. So this is a good player at duels, he's good at tackles, but he's not good at shooting goals. So the expectations are big, but he doesn't really have what it takes to deliver. So the pressure becomes humongous in this particular situation, which is interesting. Okay, I have to go through this fairly quickly, so we'll go through ego threat. Now, ego threats, or the imminence of losing or performing badly and so forth, can in many ways be a good thing for performance development. I'll show you a couple of examples, just anecdotal, obviously. Here we have, on this team picture, one player who turned out to be one of the best players in the world ever. I'm not sure if any of you can find him on this picture. He's a bit younger than when we saw him. Johan Cruyff, you know him? His sister said in the biography about Johan Cruyff, he always played with older boys, bigger and stronger. Here's another top player, really top player. You may recognize him, Cristiano Ronaldo. I always played with older players that forced me to grow up faster. So many of these players, possibly due to a little bit more talent than others or higher capabilities than others, tended to play with much older players, better players when they were young. This is the final example. Wayne Rooney. Some of the other players of Everton under 10 were much bigger than me. Some of them I also thought were better than me, but seeing the ones who were better made me try even harder. And that's the whole point. Seeing the other ones who are better made me try even harder. So they were able to pull themselves up even more, mobilize more effort, and so forth, because they were lagging behind compared to the others. So this is just an example how a certain type of ego threat can be good in terms of development. Now, in terms of performance under high pressure, the image is slightly different. I'm going to show you one penalty here. This is a famous one by Roberto Baggio, the World Cup final 1994. Those of you who are quick have seen the score here, that when Baggio now is stepping up to take this penalty, if he misses this shot, then it's all over for Italy, and Brazil has won the World Cup. So this is a pretty important shot. The FIFA record said that 1.1 billion people looked at this shot on television, so you can imagine the pressure.
Da slipper brasilianerne å skyte det siste hvis det misser. Reddet fra Farrell, så Brasil verdensmestere. Brasil har vunnet!
Famous miss. Now, how often do players miss in these particular situations? These particular situations being those critical situations where if you miss, then your team instantly lose the shootout. So it's a very, very high pressure shot. Compared to other shots, still important, but there's not a direct, instant implication of your missed shot. This is the data on that, based on, again, all the penalties ever taken in penalty shootouts in these three big tournaments. So those Roberto Baggio shots we see here are missed 62% of the times, compared to regular shots that are missed, are scored 62% and are scored 74%. So players in the Baggio situation, they miss somewhat less, though not significantly so, than players in the neutral situation. Now here we can also add another condition, and that is the opposite of the Baggio shot, where if you miss, there's no real instant implication at all, but if you score, you can put your hands in the air because your team has won the penalty shootout. So that's more of a positively toned shot. And the score for those shots look like this. 92% of those shots are scored, which is significantly different than the negative possible to lose shots. But this to me says something about the power of the thoughts you have leading up to a performance situation. Do you focus on the positive implications of your performance or the negative implications of your performance? And to me this is quite powerful, and maybe the most important result that we have in these studies. I could go on about a lot of other ego threat conditions, and I just briefly mentioned this one. One thing that we find is that the preceding team outcome, so how your team did in the previous penalty shootout, and also if they have two previous penalty shootouts, the two previous shootouts, clearly affects or is related to the extent to which you perform individually in the current shootout. So a team, if you play on a team that has 2 wins in the preceding shootouts, then you will score on 89% of your shots. But if your team has 2 losses in the previous shootouts, you score on 57% of your shots. And this difference is also significant when we only look at players who were not themselves involved in the previous penalty shootout. This is not just because the same players are on these teams and have low skill in these situations and so on. So it seems that ego threats can come from various sources and affect players in these situations. So that was a little bit about the past. Let's go to the very near past. When you perform the shot, does what you do after the shot matter to the team performance overall in a penalty shootout? I'll show you a couple of examples. We're going to look at 2 goals. Early in the shootout, so the teams are tied, nothing is decided at all. And we'll look at 2 different ways to respond to those goals, 2 different ways to celebrate the goal. First, the Swedish player from 2004, Christian Wilhelmsson. Look at how happy he is after he has scored his goal. This was actually an important goal because it put Sweden up, and now Netherlands had to score on their next shot to remain in the penalty shootout. So a really important goal, but still not a lot of joy. Now let's see if we can get the contrasts. Maradona, and I'll remind you that he will score here, but this penalty shootout is far from over. There are many more shots to be taken after him. penalty shootout goes on. So the question is, which one of these players would you rather be on the team? When I ask this question to players, 90% will go for Maradona, and not only because he's Maradona. And the data are actually quite astonishing. 82% of the players who celebrate more than a specified minimum after goal will end up on the winning team. So 82% of the players who celebrate. In fact, if you celebrate, and the way we've operationalized this here is that you use your hands above shoulder height. There are a lot of behavioral specifications to that. But all of these data go in the same direction. The more you celebrate, the more your chance is of ending up in the winning team. That's also when we control for the stand in the penalty shootout. So we only looked at shots where it's equal. So it's not like you're ahead and you're more than likely going to win, because it's easier to celebrate them. But it's always equal. And it is like that. The more you celebrate, the higher the chance of you ending up in the winning team. It will affect the next teammates on your team. They will increase the chance of scoring. It will also affect the next opponent. So you will reduce the chance of the next opponent scoring by about 15% if you celebrate like that. And we explain this as a result of emotional contagion, that your emotions will actually rub off on others, both teammates and opponents. Okay, emotional distress. Starting in the regular game first a little bit, by just a quote from Arsene Wenger that I really like. The comfort zone is the biggest enemy of top football. Top players' job is to be on the edge of exhaustion, mentally and physically. The ones at the top have a dissatisfaction and a frustration in them, with a desire to do something special. A top player is a dissatisfied person, not a happy person. Almost masochistic. Sometimes show this quote to football parents, and they're not very enthusiastic. But in many ways, this is the case. And we see a lot of indications also in our data that players who are able to keep discomfort in a pressure situation and not panic as a result of that will perform better. And I'll show you an indication of that. This is some data on the waiting time when you are in a position to take a penalty shot. You put the ball down on the spot, you stepped back, and you're standing here waiting for the signal from the referee. The time interval that you're standing there waiting, that's what we've been measuring. And this is a time interval that you cannot control as a player, because it's up to the referee. The goalkeeper on the other team can't control it. Edwin van der Sar, look on Saturday if it's a penalty shootout. He's an expert at making the other players wait in this position. And like you can see here, players who wait for a very short time, they score on 95% of the shots. And then it gradually goes down. So players who wait a little bit longer, they score less, down to 61% here. And then it goes up, but there could be a lot of outliers in this that makes those data a little bit strange.